Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to do a proper clutch bleeding. This is according to the Honda Factory Service Manual, and this is for the 8th generation Civic Si, as well as the RSX Type S, K20Z3 and K20A2 engines. However, this method is applicable for many different types of Hondas and many different types of cars as well. Now you're going to want a torque wrench that is accurate under 10 foot-pounds. This is a inch-pound torque wrench. This is fine. You're going to want an 8mm hollow socket for the torque wrench and the final torque. You're going to want a 10mm line wrench, an 8mm line wrench, open and close end. You're going to want a small socket wrench with a 10mm socket at the end. You're going to want a few bottles of brake fluid, clutch fluid, whatever type of fluid your manufacturer recommends. It's best to have the OEM fluid, but if not, find a high quality alternative. This is a high temperature synthetic, and it's found pretty much anywhere. You're going to want a second bottle or third bottle that's half full of brake fluid, and then you're going to take this clear plastic tube, about 3 feet of it, and I'll get you the specs on that in a sec. You're going to take that, and one end of it you're going to submerge in the brake fluid. The other end you're going to connect to the nozzle at the end of the slave cylinder, and once you connect that, the actual clutch hydraulic system will continue through the slave cylinder and then through this clear plastic tube, so you can actually see the makeup of your clutch hydraulic system. Now as you open the nozzle on the slave cylinder, fluid and air will come out during the bleeding process. Air will work its way through the tube and then basically out of the system, and at a certain point when you open the actual nozzle, only fluid will come out and there won't be any air bubbles coming out of the actual slave cylinder. And then you can look through the line and basically it'll be solid fluid all the way up until there's an air gap at the very end. That way you can actually have a visual representation of the actual clutch hydraulic system, and you're going to want to bleed it enough to where there's absolutely no air coming out, no air in the line, and then you can ensure that your clutch hydraulic system is operating properly. So make sure to always use unopened bottles of brake fluid. Any fluid that actually goes into the system should be from an unopened bottle, .3, .4. The reason for that is that over time, if the bottle's open, it can basically compromise the fluid that's within here. So always use fluid that's from a brand new container when going into the system. So you're going to want to get about 2 or 3 feet of 3/16 inch ID clear vinyl tubing, and you're going to want to get this from a hardware store. Undo the clutch fluid reservoir bolt, which is a 10mm. So once you get that bolt off, you can put some paper towels down so that when you open that cap, you don't spill any clutch fluid anywhere. So then you can take the cap off and fill the reservoir up to the max line with clutch fluid. Now always keep this full as you do the clutch bleeding process. According to the Honda Factory Service Manual, you will close the cap. You will actually put the cap back on as you're doing the bleeding process, but make sure to take it off and check the level as you go through it, because you don't want this to actually run out. If this runs out, there will be air introduced into the system again, and you'll have to keep bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. So you're going to want to locate your slave cylinder. You're going to take off this dust cap here. So you're going to want to put the closed inside of a 8mm line wrench over the nozzle and onto the actual nut. And then you're going to put the tube onto that nozzle right there. Make sure to get the tube all the way onto the nozzle securely. Then you're going to take the other end of the hose and submerge it in a half full container of brake fluid. So with the cap closed, you're going to pump the pedal a couple times, and then you're going to open up the valve on the slave cylinder. So pump it about 5 times slowly, and then you're going to want to push down the clutch again and hold it. wedge it down just like that. So with the pedal depressed, we're going to crack this free. Close. So then you're going to repeat the same steps as last time. Check the reservoir for fluid, let the clutch back up, pump it a few times, hold it down, crack the nozzle again. Now your fluid level should go down a little bit. As you can see, it's now down at the max. Now you're going to want to continue this clutch bleeding process until no air bubbles come out when you crack this bleeder valve open, and that there's no air bubbles in this line. It's just pure fluid until you get to the end where obviously there will be some air. As you can see, throughout the whole line there's no air, and then there will be air there, which is fine. When there's no air bubbles in the line and no air bubbles come out when you crack the bleeder valve, that will ensure that even if the system is sucking up this fluid, it won't be sucking up any air, and it'll be just pure fluid throughout the whole system. So as you'll see here, there's going to be no air bubbles that come out when I crack this free. Right? And then tighten it back down just a little bit before you actually torque it down to the right spec. Replace fluid in the reservoir up to the max level, and then close the cap. So we're going to let this back up. Feels nice and solid. So another tip from the Honda factory service manual, you can come to the clutch fork, which is right there, and what they tell you to do is to wedge something in between the clutch fork and the chassis, or in this case I have a aftermarket battery. But you're going to want to depress that clutch fork and push it in towards the slave cylinder, and then put something in between, and what that'll do is it'll provide extra pressure through the system, and it'll basically pressurize the system a little bit, and it'll force air out that normally wouldn't come out. So if you're not getting proper pressure on your pedal, it's a good thing to do. I'll show you how to do that. As you can see, I wedged a socket between my clutch fork and my battery holder. You can use a piece of wood or whatever you can get to fit perfectly in order to depress that. You're going to want to depress that, and then you're going to want to pump the clutch a few more times. So now that you wedge the clutch fork, your pedal's going to get very tough after you pump it, and when you hold it down it's going to be extremely solid. There's going to be a lot of pressure. Then you're going to do the same thing. You're going to open up the bleeder valve, let the fluid out, close it, and then let the pedal back up. Alright, so after you do that a few times, you can take this wedge out here and continue the process. So once your bleeding process is complete, I like to stuff a rag down in here and then make sure that this wrench is tighten this nut right here, and then you're going to want to remove this tube, and there will be a little bit of fluid, but the rag should catch most of it. So then you can take this wrench off, and this gets torqued down to 8 Newton meters, otherwise known as 5.8 foot-pounds, but you should use a inch-pound torque wrench for that, and that will be 69.6 inch-pounds. So to confirm clutch operation, this is with the clutch pedal out, the clutch engaged, and then I'm going to push the pedal in and show you the clutch fork disengaged. Okay, and this is how it looks with the clutch pedal pressed down and the clutch disengaged. You can see the extension there, and when I let the pedal back out, it will go back to where it was. And that's back to normal with the clutch pedal out. So you're going to want to put the reservoir back and bolt down that bolt right there. Okay, now that you got that bolted down, the reservoir full, and you've got this torqued down, you can put the dust cap back on, and you should be good to go.